Welcome to the Saints City and Me, a podcast sending audio love letters to New Orleans and her Saints. Today we are joined by a special guest, one of the most popular Saints journalists who has been covering the Saints since 2011 for various organisations and is currently with Athlon Sports. It's the time machine himself, Mr. John Hendrix. How are you, John?
I'm doing great, fellas. How about you guys?
Yeah, we're all good.
Doing good.
As we were saying off air, we're a bit chillier than you are.
Yeah, I bet. It's been like nice. It's a little bit chilly. Now I say chilly, it's like 40s and 50s at night, and then it warms up to like 70 something during the day. So it's, we had our winter run where it snowed here and all that other stuff, which is bizarre. We only get snow like once every 7 years, but I mean, it's back to normal. This is how it goes.
Did the boys enjoy the snow, John? I'm sure it's a rarity for them.
So much. Like, that was the only thing I hoped for them was that, like, they get to experience snow and such, and then just couldn't keep them from going outside. It's like every time it's like, go play, and then come in, warm up, and then let's go play again. So it was great. We had a lot of walks to it. It was just insane how white it was, like a winter wonderland around here.
Yeah.
It was wonderful seeing everyone.
Sorry, I think I've got a really mad delay, by the way. I do apologise. I was literally going to say, it was like, we've mentioned it before, but it was a bit, that period where it snowed in the city was a bit of a timeline cleanse on Twitter X or whatever you want to call it these days. I've never seen a city so happy to see snow. It was remarkable.
Yeah. No, it was definitely a general feeling around here. It's just like, we don't see it often, and we don't see it ever, really. And so for some people, it's like the first time in their life they've seen snow in here. So it's pretty cool.
So, Mike, should we just talk a little bit about the Saints and get John's views on
Sure.
where we are at the moment, or what's been going on? Obviously, coaching staff's secured, John, and it looks like all the backroom hires have taken place. What are your thoughts on what's taken place over the last sort of 6 weeks?
I mean, it's exciting, I'd say, for starters, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing is, I mean, it's almost like a complete turnover, right? From what they had. They only held over a handful of coaches, and that was kind of what we expected. And, for New Orleans, I mean, this is the direction they need to go in, right? There's some familiarity there with Kellen Moore. There's some that's unfamiliarness with some of the coaches that he's hired. And so, look, the biggest thing that he stressed with his coaching staff is the fact that they're excellent communicators and excellent teachers. And look, that's an area where New Orleans has to get better. And you look at kind of the debacles over the last couple of years, there's just been a lot of kind of like do whatever you want type things, I feel like, in some aspects that, where coaches aren't developing players. There's no alignment on game plan. It's all just like discombobulated, right? And so I'm excited because Kellen Moore is generally excited to be here. And that's just kind of what sold it for me is let's get the guy who wants to be here and who's happy to be here and can grin ear to ear. And, a lot of these assistant coaches, we got to meet with them, earlier in the week on Monday, and they're real fired up about this too. I think they've got a very diverse staff, and, I just hope it works, right? Like, I'm not expecting magic and miracles here, but marked improvement heading in the right direction is what we want to see.
Yeah, you definitely want to see that player development taking place from those coaches. I'm quite intrigued by the college guys he's bringing in as well, because we don't see that as much as you would expect. I think is a fair comment. And to see him bring those guys in, it obviously I would imagine, his one eye on the draft and young players coming in and bringing that development over from, developing college players into NFL players.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's part of it, right? And, bring a little bit of everything. And, like Terry Joseph over there in the defensive back room, he was at Texas, right? And Peter Sherman, that's another one on the West Coast. I mean, I think you're going to get some of these coaches who have their eye on particular, talent and such. And the Saints, look, they need a lot in this draft. I mean, they do, but they don't, right? And they haven't drafted particularly well in the last several years. And I mean that overall, like, they've had some good things here and there, but, I think with them swapping to this 3-4 scheme, it allows them to get away from some of their prototypes. It allows them to really just kind of hone in on what they absolutely need. And look, I think, again, I've been telling people for months that they were kind of doing this compete thing. I never got the sense that they were just going to strip it down, tear it down, rebuild, all this other stuff. They want to push for the division. A lot of their moves have echoed that. And whether you're excited about that or not, it's like running it back with a different coaching staff. And maybe it'll change something. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll fall flat on their face. But I mean, it's at least on the surface different in a lot of aspects.
Yeah, it's almost a no-win situation, isn't it? Because obviously a lot of people are saying, "Oh, we're running it back." Obviously, that when you think of that, you think of the Carr situation. A question for you: I don't know, in your time covering the Saints, have you ever seen a player split the Saints fan base as much as Carr? Because it going on Twitter at times feels dangerous.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. It's mean streets out there, right? Like, I mean, that's a big one, right? I mean, it's just you can't have an opinion without somebody like really shooting you down, right? You could say, you just present a fact, and then somebody's going to say he's hot garbage. Somebody's going to say this is what we expect, and somebody's going to talk about elite. Like, it's just crazy to see it all, right? And I get it. Look, the thing about Derek Carr is the optics with him not going and being around in the Super Bowl week. That doesn't look good. And, you know, what I theorized about him and what ended up being true is that he was back home rehabbing, and it wasn't just his hand injury that he was rehabbing. But, you know, the thing is, he doesn't say anything. Like, he's a real quiet type of person. And so it's not like he's going to sit here and blast and say, okay, guys, I'm out here on the West Coast. I'm back home rehabbing and all this stuff. And so, but it leaves room for interpretation. And obviously Saints fans, you know, when you're not winning, it's hard to live up to a Drew Brees and all this.
Yeah.
It's hard to live up to Sean Payton. And unfortunately, that's where most people's shadows are going to be. And, you know, that's just how it goes. And we'll see. We'll see what happens for 2025. Again, that was another one. I got the sense he was coming back. It's just the Saints didn't really handle that well in the first place.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're pushing forward and all this other stuff now.
I think when the restructure was announced, everyone jumped on it, and we did some stupid meme type stuff and things. But actually, when the dust settles, you're like, actually, they've got an out next year, and it's not as bad as it potentially could have been. But the numbers that came out straight away, everyone was like, oh my God, this is awful. But when you actually unpick it and, you know, go into Sport Rack or Over the Cap and look at what next year looks like as a post June 1st cut or something like that, the actual numbers aren't as bad as they hit next year, is what I think people's knee-jerk reaction was. So I think, as Mike said, I think he does provoke a lot of emotion from the fan base, one way or the other. I saw one guy today, he wasn't a Saints fan, but he said that he thought that Carr's play over the last 3 years was better than Mahomes, and I was just like, nope, I can't buy that. I think he was a Raiders fan. But I was like, I'm not buying that. I know you're selling it, but I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
No, you know, I mean, if you look at some of his statistics, he does rank, you know, again, I wrote this about when I was just previewing the quarterbacks and just kind of ranking where he ranks statistically. He did rank favorably in some of the categories, right? And so, again, for him, you know, the reason why the cap and his hit are so overblown is because the Saints did this in the first place. They restructured him. That's how it goes. Just like Cam Jordan was going to be a $24 million cap hit. They weren't going to pay him $24 million, just like they weren't going to pay Carr, you know, the $40+ million this year. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say defending or be pro for him or anything like that. It's just that here's the facts. Here's what the reality is. This is where they're at, and now we just got to move forward. But if I'm Spencer Rattler, I'm ready. I'm staying ready, very, very, very ready in case.
Yeah, you sort of hope this year. You hope this year that it is, you know, not so much a QB battle. But I know last year, obviously, you had who is number two, and I mean, yet again, some of the optics that were coming out of the building where they just wouldn't actually make a decision on it, when I think they actually sort of knew. I think. And yet again, the optics, it just doesn't help anyone. It's like, you know, if you know who your QB2 is, and also I'm not entirely sure if that helps the player with the uncertainty that's sort of laid all over it. But this year, yeah, you're right. If Spencer Rattler is primed, ready, has done the work, you know, there's distinct part he gets his opportunity, because obviously Derek Carr's getting a bit older, and obviously he's been a little bit injury impacted in the last few years. So there's a real possibility you might get another opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's the thing is, and early on, again, they were trying to split the reps and all that. I thought Jake Hayner had some good days. Spencer Rattler showed some major progression and such. And again, it was one of those too close to call type situations. But, you know, as it worked its way up, Rattler showed a lot more growth in the times where, you know, towards the end, which I feel like was what ultimately helped him out the most, is him putting it together. But again, you know, Carr is a little bit older. And the thing is, if he's not the quarterback in 2026, if I'm the Saints and if I'm a fan, I really kind of want to know what the succession plan is, because they cannot afford to be left in the situation where they did with Drew Brees and just say, all right, well, we don't really have a plan on the roster. We're just going to go to free agency. And then that free agent decision doesn't work out for you because of injury. And then it's a carousel. Like, they don't need to go down this road again.
No. I mean, and talking about free agency, like, I think this free agency class has been a little bit underwhelming in terms of, you look at previous years when there's some blockbuster players coming out, and this year it's felt as though there isn't as big a, like, I want this player, I want that player. In terms of the Saints activity, they've brought in Justin Reed. They announced today Will Clapp's coming back. I'm going to butcher this. Davon Godchaux. Godchaux, have I got that right? He's come back. Devon Godchaux, that's it. Yeah. Got it. I'm still working on something. I can say Chopasulas, but some of them I'm still struggling with. There seems to be like I don't know if it's intentional, but they've got a lot of Louisiana boys in the building now. Do you think that there's a little bit of intent there in terms of, one, I think, fan base, if you've got a choice in two players and they're sort of similar levels, but one's from Louisiana, it's like maybe it plays to the fan base a little bit, and also maybe there's a little bit of extra drive and desire for these hometown boys to come home and play for their state's team.
I mean, I think some of it can be there. I think some of it can be coincidental. Again, I think obviously the LSU ties are big there, or just Louisiana ties, but Justin Reed and Tyrann Mathieu played together. You know what I mean? And somebody like Isaac Yadam, he's played under Braylon Saylor, or, some of that defense and some of those coaches before. Will Clapp, he played under the Chargers system with Brendan Nugent a little bit. So there's familiarity with a lot of the players.
Some synergy there,
still happen. Yeah, it just so happens that they are. And, Saints get such a rap for saying, well, they don't ever draft LSU players. I remember the one year it's like they take, a Tulane and all this other stuff. They look over that way. It's just, it's something that happens, but it's always a good feel-good story when you have somebody who's homegrown, returns, and then you got the loyalty there. I mean, that's why Tyrann, he never was going to move on. He wanted to play. He wanted to be back. He was going to make it work, but there was a thing that came out that he was potentially going to get released, and that was never a thing from everything I was told and from early on in the process, that they weren't considering releasing him, and he was going to be a team player and do everything he needed to do on his end.
Yeah, go on that subject of sort of, Tyrann restructuring, and obviously, the re-signing of Juwan and obviously the Chase news as well this week. The Chase young one is probably the most intriguing. The Juwan Johnson one, again, has upset a lot of people. I'm not that upset. It's basically a 2-year deal. Obviously they had to, and obviously it helped with the cap this year. But the Chase one, because, again, we know that he was sort of, from a measurables in pressure point of view, he was sort of in the top 5 or near the top 5 last year. And it's almost like there's just there's one more step that he needs to take, and then he'll probably get to or it feels like he could almost get to the point where we want him, which is double-digit sacks. What are your thoughts on the Chase Young situation, John?
Yeah, look, I mean, you got to pay for a pass rusher, and I think the Saints, I mean, it's what I reported all along, that he loved his time in New Orleans. He really genuinely liked being here, and again, we were on a Zoom call with him talking about his contract extension and such. I only echoed that. I mean, again, New Orleans does get a bad rap, right? You know what I'm saying? From the national media, all this other stuff. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to coach there. Nobody wants to go there. But this locker room is right. No doubt. Sometimes I want to be in the UK. Trust me, it's fun. But again, it gets a bad rap. But these players, they do have this bond, and there is some strong leadership here. I mean, this team, the way their cohesion is, and again, it doesn't lead to wins. I mean, it hasn't led to winning seasons, all this other stuff, or playoffs or anything like that. But again, there's something there when you fit in. You like what's going on. And for Chase Young, I mean, it's a new defensive scheme. They actually have a coach that's specifically over the edge group now, not just the defensive line. So I think that's actually an added bonus for this team. And look, there's no question about it. I agree with you. Chase Young, he does have to finish plays. He does have to get sacks. I don't know that that's always the measuring stick, even though I get it. It is the measuring stick. But it's kind of one of those, if he got double-digit sacks last year, I don't think the Saints win more than 5 games, even though it does matter. But, they just got to focus as a defense, getting off the field, stop giving up 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, all that stuff. And that does rely heavily on the pass rush. It just does.
Yeah. It's funny, though, like, if you've got...
Go on, Mike.
Sorry,
You're
Dan,
good.
I was just going to say, it's funny, though, because if he had got double-digit sacks last year, the Saints wouldn't have been signing him back for this amount of money. Yet again, it's like, I know what you're saying, John, the measurables are the measurables, but, you know, everybody sees it with their own eyes, and all they a lot of the time, all they see is, well, how many sacks did he get? Forget about the rest of the game. So, you know, let's just hope, let's hope he can combine the pressures with the sacks, and then we've got a bargain.
Yeah, no doubt.
I was just going to say, it almost felt like, I don't know if you see that interview Cam did, John, when he was saying, you know, sacks are an overinflated stat and you need to look at what other things edges do. And I wonder if there's a little bit of a nod to that to sort of say, you know, look at, you know, it's not just about sacks, it's the other things that we do to help the team win, which, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true because, Jordan was one of those a long time ago. I mean, that was a debate that, you know, people got on Cam Jordan, and then that's where analytics came in and said, no, you're not really paying attention to everything. This is what what he actually does, his, you know, run stop or his eating block, whatever the case may be. That's why I like enhanced stats, because if you go beyond some of that stuff that, you know, surface level stuff, you see that a player does make impact. And I get it. We just look at go to your favorite site, NFL.com or whatever, and say, here's the final stats. Oh, he didn't play well. It's not always.
Yes.
I've just got one more question just on the Saints, John. In terms of the shift to a 3-4, who do you think on the roster that benefits the most? I sort of got an eye on Brazil, but do you think there's one player we've got you think he's going to absolutely feast in this kind of, or Taylor if they put him in like the star or something like that?
Yeah, I like to see what Carl Granderson is going to do. I think that's one that I think the opposite of Chase Young. Granderson had kind of a down year and such, and look, I think Brazil's a great pick there. I think Alante can do extremely well. I don't know what his particular role is, and I don't know if they're going to use Kool-Aid in that role too. I mean, it remains to be seen, but, you know, I think Carl Granderson is a guy who can do a lot of different things for the Saints team, and I would really love to see him hit another level. And again, you look at some of these teams that are in the Super Bowl, the Eagles, look at the pressure they were able to get to Mahomes. I mean, the defense wins championships, and if you can get Granderson to a level where he needs to be with Chase Young, and then you've got some nice reserve talent behind that, and you can get those front three where it needs to be. Look, I feel good because the Saints' run defense was 31st last year. They were horrible, right? Only the Panthers are worse. They gave up a lot of yards per play. I mean, they just weren't where they needed to be. And so I love the fact that they're giving it attention. I don't think they're done giving it attention, but, you know, at the same time, these players have to go out and execute. And I think with these coaches on board, Brandon Staley, with the rest of them, they're going to have the right game plans, and everybody's going to be on that same page.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Granderson's got the physique for it, isn't he, and the speed. So, yeah, definitely I think he could benefit from it.
Yeah, and finally, the one that did get the timeline exciting was the addition of Justin Reed. Very happy to get him in. A quality player, obviously a proven player. Seems like a decent enough deal. Are you happy with that one, John? You excited as the fan base were about that one?
Yeah, no, I think that's a major hit. And the best thing I love about him is he can tackle. And I think that's an area where the Saints have to get better at as well, is they need to tackle. And so Justin 100%. Reed is grading it out as a strong guy in coverage and run support and everything. I think he's going to do a fantastic job there on the back end. But again, like I said, the tackling is what stands out for me. He's got the experience. He's a strong addition, and he's worked with Tyron in the past. And so I think this is a thing where they really can feed off of each other and help each other out a little bit. And look, to get him and knowing that there were other teams in the running for Justin Reed, and they Saints are the ones that come away with him, that's pretty big win. And again, for a team that nobody wants to come to, you know what I mean? That's the narrative.
Yeah. Mike, do you want to, should we shift off of the Saints?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but obviously, John, we've spoken to you before when you were on with Ross, and one of the things that obviously that the Saints City and me tend to do is we normally we try to talk to international fans and find out about their journey to following the Saints. And we like to also find out from people who cover Saints exactly how they their journey on a journalistic route, what it was like, how it became what it became. We spoke to Ross, and Ross has obviously got a very interesting story. Nick Underhill has also got an interesting story, but myself and Dan are aware of your story, and it is a very, very interesting story. So Could you just give us an idea of exactly what your journey was? Obviously, we know there were difficult circumstances at the beginning of your life, which yet again makes your journey even more impressive. So you weren't born in the US.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. How did your life journey start? Because that had its own issues in itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tell people too, and especially it doesn't hit you until like you're filling out certain things. It says place of birth, and I'm like, well, mine's not in the United States. I was actually born in Honduras, and so I was adopted when I was a baby because I was not a planned baby, and so I got left in a hotel room, and some maids found me. I mean, this is absolutely 100% true story. And so then, it's a very poverty stricken area. I was born in the capital, Tegucigalpa. And then so I go up for adoption, all this other stuff. And my mom and dad, who are my mom and dad, they're my adopted parents, but they are my parents, right? And so my mom they wanted another child because I do have a sister. They're biological. She's about 9 years older than I am. But so they wanted another kid. They couldn't have another kid. And she flew down to Honduras. She was staying with some friends that they had met for over the course of time and such. And she said she went into the hospital and saw the babies. And the first baby she saw, and it locked eyes, it was me. And then, she stayed in Honduras for a few months and then ended up adopting me. And so my dad worked in the oil field growing up. We lived in southern Arkansas at the first part of my life, then moved to East Texas, and then southern Louisiana is where I ended up after that. Right after Hurricane Andrew, I think in 1992, it was May 92 or May 93, something like that. And, for me, just as a kid growing up, it's different because, my parents are white, Caucasian, right? I'm Hispanic. My family is white, you know what I'm saying? And Caucasian, but they never treated me different, it was never awkward. I knew early on I was adopted. I was never hidden from the fact of it. I knew the circumstances, which I always appreciated. And so, man, it was something, right? To go from that. And, my life could have looked a lot different, right? I could have been a military person by 10 to 12 over there. I could have been wrapped up in drugs. I could have done all these different things. So look, I think I had somebody looking out for me, obviously. And I'm not caught off guard by that. And so it's crazy to go from all of that to just now, I mean, that's 40 plus years ago, but it's something. I'll say that.
Do you think it was your luscious mop of hair that was the thing that appealed to your mother? I know you're very proud of that luscious mop, John.
I used to just grow it short. Like I used to have it short because I just didn't want to fool with it, and I started growing out. But to tell you a funny story, and I think I still have the picture. I don't know if I have the plaque, but I was born with a big old head of hair, and then they put me in like this baby beauty contest when I was like less than 6 months old, and I ended up taking it down. And it was because of the hair, I think. It was a smile too, but like the hair. Yeah, it's crazy, man, to think about it. But yeah, it's got to be one of the reasons why. I'm Hispanic, got all the genes for it.
I like the John Hendrix haircut updates on Instagram when he comes out all fresh in the car.
Transformation, man! It is. They do fantastic work.
Little plug for the barbers. You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
I do. Yeah, they make me look decent and presentable for covering the Saints. So that's what I'll say.
So John, did you go? Where'd you go to school in Louisiana or in Texas?
So I started in Texas. We used to do. I did kindergarten, and back then, I'm dating myself, obviously, but we only went for half a day, and then so I was the morning half day, and then I went to school in Texas, East Texas, until midway through third grade, and then that's when I moved down to Louisiana, and specifically Lafayette, Cajun country. And so when I tell people where I grew up, it's Lafayette. You know what I mean? I spent almost 14 years there. And, I love Cajun cooking. I can cook Cajun food. I can crawfish boil. I can do all that stuff. And I never forget the first experience I ever had because we lived next door to some folks. Their last name is Olivier. So like when you look at the spelling or the, it looks like Oliver, but it's Olivier, and they were from like Arnaville and all these other areas that are totally Cajun. And one of their first experiences, they were cooking jambalaya in those big gigantic witches pots. You know what I mean? And it was just like the coolest thing how they did it. But yeah, it's that's where I ended up going, and then I went to a little bit of college at UL Lafayette, and so I moved to the New Orleans area. I live on the North Shore, which is across that big old bridge that everybody talks about, the Causeway. I moved there right after Katrina because I worked for Best Buy once upon a time, and I worked for them almost 10 years. And so I had a promotion out there. I took it, was at Covington after the Katrina stuff, and the area is still recovering where I was at, and so it was a great move, and I've been here ever since.
So we've doubled down on Covington because our last podcast, our friend Eric, who's from Covington, and coincidentally he talked about living over in West Louisiana, and he was telling us about the crawfish boils where they sprinkle the seasoning on after, and he said he was like, I don't get it. No. He said you got to suck the head, and that's what the flavor is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that one. I know they call it, sometimes they say like Vietnamese boil, but if you want the heat and the seasoning, the water is what matters, right? And so that's where you put all your PLC, love, all that stuff. And yeah, I've been boiling crawfish for a long time, and I learned for some of the best, and that's how you get the flavor. Not sprinkle seasoning at the end.
It's probably one of the only things we can't really do here, isn't it, Mike? Crawfish just aren't. Yeah. Or they call them crayfish here. They just don't get big enough to do a crawfish boil. But we try with the gumbo and the jambalaya and the etouffee and everything else. But we give it a go where we can.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's something about here. I'm sure you guys can attest to it. But when you visit here, you leave about 5 to 10 pounds heavier because of all the good food.
You've got to go on a diet before you come. You have to go on a diet before you come over.
After.
Yeah, I was over at Christmas and took my son, my family to like Ruby Slipper in the first morning. It's across the road from my hotel. My son ordered these pancakes, and he was just like, "These are the best pancakes I've ever had in my life." And I took one bite. I went, "I don't even want to know how many calories are in that, but that is amazing. That is amazing."
Accurate.
Yeah,
John. Just obviously, you when you were in Lafayette, you were. Was that when you were at college?
Yeah, I was in college. I went to a couple of years. UL Lafayette for a little bit. And, what's interesting is what else to blow people's mind is I actually played hockey growing up. I played hockey for 20 years. And it was a hockey boom down in Louisiana. It was somewhat after this, like the Mighty Ducks era thing that happened and all this stuff. They had a semi-pro team called the Louisiana Ice Gators that came through. And if you ever watch my shows and stuff, you'll see the jersey in the back. That's where it comes from. But they were a semi-pro team that came in, and we packed that place out for years. And it was just like a big hockey boom. We had rink after rink come up, and, I played, I guess Pee-wees and all this other stuff. And I played both ice and roller hockey. And, I played even a little bit of college hockey. We had an inline college hockey team. So it's pretty crazy how that all unfolded. And then I kept playing as an adult, and, it's one of those that just doesn't leave you. Like I always want to play every single day, and it's just hard sometimes with playing a new job. But yeah, UL Lafayette, it used to be USL. And then when I was there, 2002 to 2004 was UL Lafayette.
I thought there was a Red Wings jersey in your Red Wings. Who am I thinking of?
I've got Red Wings. Yeah,
he's a Red Wings. Yeah,
that's my team.
So that's your team. Yeah. I'm a New York Rangers guy. I have to have a New York team because whenever I go, I like to catch a game. To me, it's like the closest thing to soccer in terms of speed and fluidity when it comes to US sports. Rather, others can be a little bit stop-starty. So. Not that I don't like them. Obviously, I love them.
Yeah. I took my wife when we were in New York, this is 2021, I guess. I took her to a Rangers game. They went and played the Predators. I was so excited, for the song and everything, and they got shut out 1-0 by the Predators. So I'm like, come on now.
I'm batting at 1,000. I've never seen them lose. Every time I've been to see them, they've won. So I'm doing all right. But yeah, that atmosphere is great when the Pennywise song, or whatever it is. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really good.
So, John, what were you studying in college? I think people might be a bit surprised to hear it.
Yeah. So I was a music major at first. I had a background in music, vocal. I played instrument, but I also was a singing person. And so I went for music. And so I did opera, erratic stuff, all these different things. Ooh. And so it was kind of nuts, but they don't tell you about being a music major and all these other things is you take classes that are normal classes and you only get like 1 or 2 credit hours, whereas in regular class you get 3. So the workload in that was exponentially higher. So I was almost like at double the classes versus what a normal freshman and stuff was. And that didn't go too well. But, you know, you live, you learn, you figure it out. And yeah, it was nuts. But yes, music was my thing at first.
I take it we can't convince you to give us a burst.
Oh, man, I can't do that on the spot. I can't do that on the spot.
You still warm up.
Right. Let me get a sip of water. No.
Yeah. So, John, you end up in. Oh, so go on, Mike. I'll let you go. You good?
No, I'll let you go, mate. Sorry, my delay is awful.
I was going to say, so you end up in New Orleans region. You're working at Best Buy, and is that that's where you met your wife? Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so it was interesting. I was her boss, and we worked in the mobile department, which is mobile phones and stuff.
There's nothing wrong with that, Mike.
You know what's crazy is and you can ask her if I'm lying, I'm dying. I never showed her an ounce of favoritism. And she always got to hear me complain double because when I had to address my team, I would vent to her and then I'd vent to her afterwards or whatever the case may be, like before or after. So yeah, no, we met there. You know, it was interesting because she always talks about the first time we had a conversation. It was snowing in Louisiana and I had to help her get directions because she lives in about 40. She lived at the time about 45 minutes from the store. And so I had to give her the back way directions to get to the store when it was snowing and all this other stuff. But yeah, it was one of those things where I always thought she was a cute girl. She was a cute little Southern girl. You know, for me, we were just hanging out one time and then she just said, "So when are you going to ask me out on a date?" I was like, "All right." And then do that. And
Good girl.
That's it. So I didn't pick it up, I guess. You know, we're stupid.
I know what my wife made the first move with me. So yeah, I get that. Yeah.
All right. I chased my now wife. We've been together at the end of March. We'll have been together 30 years.
Nice. Congrats.
We've only been married 5, but I actually met her when I was 12 and she was 11.
Wow.
And I chased her all round school, and she wanted nothing to do with me. So you two have got that one over me. Well done, gents. So obviously you meet you meet the girlfriend, who obviously Stephanie then becomes your wife. She had a huge impact on you in a number of different ways. Obviously, we know faith is a really big thing for you, John, and obviously you've spoken about that on your own pod, which was Faith Beyond the Field. The faith thing, and because obviously we're now getting towards the time where I think you start to take an interest in football. Is the faith a big part of that, like a driving force behind you deciding to give the journalism sort of aspect a go? Because obviously even that journey's a big journey on its own.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say totally direct, like correlated, but like I've always been a football fan, right? Like the thing is, and I've always loved that sport, right? I always remember going to my grandfather's house. I always say the same thing, but going to my grandfather's house, and he used to record VHS. People who are young probably have no idea what I'm talking about. You used to have to record on a VHS the TV program, John, with a physical cassette.
Have you seen our beards? Have you seen these beards?
No, I'm saying whoever's tuning in, they're probably like, what the hell is
I remember Betamax. I remember Betamax.
And so I'm sitting here watching like the 85 Bears playing the 78, the Steelers, all these different things, the Broncos, all 49ers, all this stuff. And so I've always been a football nerd, right? Like I've always just been a football guy. And even though I played hockey, I loved hockey, but football and hockey were my two things. I always, in New Orleans, that was always it was on. I grew up in a Cowboys family, so most of the times we had watched the Cowboys on Sunday sometimes, and we had to go elsewhere to go find them. But, it was just one of those things. And I went to plenty of Saints games when I was young. It was always a blast doing that. But look, I was just a football nerd, you know what I mean? And I just remembered stuff in detail. And so, before I got into writing and stuff, again, we're just hanging out at the bar with some friends and doing some things, which it was just, they just turned to me as like, man, you got a lot to say. You got a lot of different takes that just seem pretty interesting. Have you ever thought about writing them or putting them out there and stuff? And I'm like, no. It's like, I didn't go to school for English or anything like that. Like, I didn't think about it, but more I thought about it, I was like, hey, shoot, what's the worst gonna happen? I like playing video games and stuff, and so I'm a big Xbox guy, but I was like, this is cool. Let's try this out and see what happens. So it was right after the 2011 season when the Saints lost to the 49ers in that horrible game and or horrible ending. And so, I just ended up starting putting myself out there, writing about stuff. It was the blog called Google Blogspot, which doesn't exist, I don't think, anymore. Called First and Five. That's what I called it.
Yeah, no,
and
we got it on our notes.
Okay, yeah. But so it's crazy. And so I used to put some stuff there, and then a couple months later, I swapped my career paths. I ended up going from Best Buy to work at a bank. So I worked for Chase Bank out here, big mega bank. And so, because I wanted something different, retail, 10 years wears on you, when you move up in all the demands and stuff. And so went for it. And in that process, one of the guys I worked with, he was working for Fansided, not working, but like contributing to Fansided. And he's like, cool, you want to get hooked up with us and, send it over to this person. And so I got joined Who Dat Dish on Fansided. It's back in 2012, I think it was, or 2013, something like that. But it was one of those things where the guy that was running the site and I ended up co-managing the site, and then he turned the site over to me, and then I spent 3.5 years at Fansided with Who Dat Dish, just kind of working, growing that brand. I'll never forget 2014. My first player interview was Jonathan Vilma, and I was nervous as hell. Now you see the Vilma jersey in the background, like that's one of the reasons. Like he was the nicest dude ever. Like it was one of these Morton Steakhouse events where they the players come in and are the servers, raise money for charity. But John Vilma, like I got to spend some one-on-one time with him, talk and interview and just stuff, and he was just the coolest dude ever. And I know that, like, for me, it kind of helped solidifies, like, I think I really want to continue doing this. And so it ended up opening up some radio opportunities. And then about 2016 or 2015, 2016, I ended up making the transition to SB Nation and Canal Street Chronicles. And so Dave Carrillo was running the site. He had done that for a long time. He's Tulane Shop on Twitter. Some people know who Dave is. And I took the site in a different direction. Not that it was bad, but I tried to make it a little bit more professional and, just kind of a little bit more respectable that way, because I was saying, okay,
a more serious sort of sports site. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. It might be a fan voice, but it's an educated fan voice who can be objective, right? Like that's kind of the thing. And so by doing that, I mean, again, another 3 years there. Between that, it was I ended up picking up stuff at the Sun Herald, the paper. I ended up doing that's in Biloxi. I ended up doing like more TV, more radio. I did I got credentialed by the Saints to cover stuff, and it just was.
John, sorry to interrupt. Was this also whilst you were doing all your work at Chase?
Yeah. No, I was doing it all in the side, right? Like
grind.
Yes.
Grind.
Yeah, there was a grind. So you have your big boy job, and then you have your fun job, which doesn't really do anything for you and pay or anything like that. And so, look, it was good, experience. And then I ended up leaving the bank and all this other stuff, and tried some different things out. And I just love the football side of it. I love putting my voice out there. I love writing about stuff. You gain a little bit of a following, and people like what you have to say. It's just good. And you just keep at it. I never say I'm perfect, but you mentioned Nick and Ross earlier. I kind of feel like we were cut from the same cloth. Nick didn't go to school for this either. Ross we're just blue collar workers who put in the time, the effort, the energy to our craft. And, this is kind of what where we're at. And I know hard work, right? Like it's just one of those things where it's always been instilled in me a long time. And, Nick's been a fantastic mentor for me and friend, and I got to learn from him some. I got to learn from a lot of people, and it was those who gave me the time of day, like Mike Triplett. He didn't have to talk to me. Like, I'm nobody. You know what I'm saying? And stuff. And when he was working for ESPN, but it was just one of those settings. And the more I covered the team, the more I wanted to cover the team. And finally, December 2019 is when I got hooked up with Sports Illustrated, and Saints News Network. And that was when it's like, okay, I finally just made a point where I'm like, all right, I'm leaving my actual job and all I'm doing is covering the Saints. So I've been doing that for a while now, and it's been nuts. But
and we are grateful that happened.
Exactly,
for sure, absolutely. John, what was it like, John, the first time when you got those credentials? Like, that must be quite for an aspiring journalist to get that access and get the credentials. That must just feel fantastic, because I'm not saying like you've made it, but you're like, I've not just got my foot in the door now. I've got the access to be able to push forward the way I want to.
Well, and the thing is about credentials is, the team is one who has the discretion. And at the time when I was coming up, the blogging world was considered non-traditional media. And so a lot of people didn't want to let people like that in. So again, through reputation, professionalism, all this other stuff, I'd like to think that's one of the reasons why I was able to get credentialed. But, there is a certain element. It's like, okay, this is cool that they at least see me and know who I am, and, kind of work through that and such. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you're like, okay, this is cool. This is a nice little feeling. And then you go to games and locker room access, all this other stuff. And it's just like blows you away. But and I just love what I do. And I always tell people, this is not a job for me, really. And the moment it does become a job, like, I'm probably out, but it's fortunate to do something that you love and be passionate about it.
Yeah. It's interesting you said that, John, because when you spoke about leaving, when you were signed on with Sports Illustrated, and you said, I was actually able to leave my job and do this. So, and I was going to pick you up on that, because it was almost like you were referencing that this isn't a job, it's a passion, it's a love, it's something you get fulfillment out. Was there a point, did you, and yet again, I know a lot of people have over the years, but did you ever have that period of time where you felt a little bit of imposter syndrome, or were you always thinking, no, I should be here? And if you did have imposter syndrome, at what point does that disappear, or does it ever disappear? Because obviously your route into journalism isn't the normal route.
Yeah, look, no, I mean, I think anybody that would tell you they don't suffer from that is probably lying to themselves, right? Like, there's times I've thought about walking away and quitting. I mean, again, I don't want to get too much into weeds, but people that look like me aren't the common norm in sports journalism world, right? People like Ross, we're not what you normally picture, what you normally see. And so there's times when you look at that, and there's only so many of these jobs sometimes, and how hard you work, and sometimes that you're not really getting maybe what you feel like you should be getting in a lot of ways. And there is some burnout sometimes that came with the job, the territory. When you write 100 and something pieces a month, and other people only have to write like 5, and they get paid way more than you do, you're like, what? Come on now. But that's the thing, is it's just always a grind, the hustle. And I've always believed that, you put in the hard work, and it'll pay off for you in some way, one way or another. And, but yes, burnout has always been a thing. Again, just that time, been like, man, I don't know if this is what space I should be in. It's awkward, or it feels weird, or what the hell am I doing? Like, all these different things. Like, absolutely, that always comes up in a lot of different ways. Not so much recently, but it has for sure.
Dan, have you got a question for John?
I have. I'm mindful of time, as I know you're a busy day, John, and everything's going on. I will go off with my my usuals. What is your go-to New Orleans classic dish? If I said to you, John, one New Orleans dish, you've got to pick it. What is it?
Well, I like I said, I can do some Cajun cooking. So me, it's my smothered pork chops and onion gravy. That's probably one of my favorite dishes that I make. I can make some. I can make some, do some cooking. So I think that's definitely one of my things.
John can cook.
I mean, I don't want to not bragging, but it's just men can cook, and I can chef, and it's not just like I follow direction. I put my heart and soul into the cooking too.
Yeah, do you know what? Funny story, John. I was making a gumbo and I was doing the roux, and my watch thought I was on a run because I was that diligent at making sure I didn't stop stirring. He said, "Oh, you want to run?" I was like, "No, I'm making gumbo."
Sounds about right. Yep.
Yeah.
The darker, the better.
If you're in, if and when you're in the city and you're there and you want to grab some breakfast, what spot would you go to, John? Is there a spot that you can recommend to me and Dan that we should probably look at?
Well, Dan said Ruby Slipper. That's definitely one.
Yeah.
One of them. Like that's absolutely good. Molly's on Sunrise is another one. They do like this imitation, like McDonald's McGriddle or something. It's just or sausage McMuffin and stuff. Their stuff is out of this world. Like I mean, those two spots probably ever got to be Molly's. And
Mason is so playful in what he does with there and Turkey and the Wolf. It's just. Yeah. Anyone who's going to the city, if you want somewhere fun to eat when you're like, this is cool. They're definitely two spots, Molly's and Turkey and the Wolf. I highly recommend them.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely.
John, we know it's a busy day for you. We do really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat to us. We could talk to you all day, but obviously, of
course,
we don't want to detract from all those other thousands of Saints fans getting their updates. One last question for me. Anyone you'd like to see the Saints sign that's left in free agency?
I don't know if I have specific player. I mean, I know people have always talked about, like, Mekhi Becton is a big one that people have talked about. I would like to see him try to find a left guard. I think I also want to see them look at more in the trenches as well. You know what I mean? And maybe a linebacker, I think, is an underrated need too. Again, I think there's a few areas where the Saints can get better at, and I feel like they're definitely not done in free agency by any means, but I think the offensive line is probably that left guard spot is my main number one priority right now.
We heard a rumor about a wide receiver, but we'll say that when we stop recording just to see if you've heard it. I don't want to put it out there and kill anyone.
Yeah, a lot of rumors do come out this time of year for sure.
Yeah. Mike?
All right. Well, yeah, John, I'd just like to say thank you very much. I really appreciate it because obviously, as Dan was saying, we know it's a very, very busy period of time for you. Really appreciate your candid nature on here. And it was absolutely fantastic to talk to you and hear your story, John.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mike. I mean, guys, I really do. And look, I didn't even really talk about the faith aspect, but just that is a huge part of who I am, right? Like, that's a big thing. I remember talking to DeMario Davis, and that's one of the things I love connecting with players in the locker room is about the faith. Like, I remember having a conversation with Jameis Winston, Derek Carr, DeMario Davis, Jawan. There's just so many different players and I think where I somewhat differ in a lot of, Ross is the same way too, but we like to try to find out about these people and get to know them on a personal level. You know what I mean? Like, this is a good thing. Like, when the coaches and stuff came in, I spent more time trying to talk about their families than anything. And it's just because these guys are human beings, right? And it is more than football. Like, football is one of the things, but just having those conversations was really nice. Andy Dalton was another one too, but yeah, definitely. I'm a huge person of faith, and I'm not ashamed of that for sure.
No, and that resonates with us.
Just on that point, John, is it obviously we have DeMario who obviously is very upfront about his faith and is a truly inspiring man. Are you seeing a little bit of a turn of the wheel here where people are feeling a little bit more free to talk about their faith in the public space? Because for a lot of time, people who are football players, celebrities, but they wouldn't because they thought there might be some sort of tear down of them. But are you seeing that slightly change now?
Yeah, I see a ton of change in that, right? Like, and I'll tell you, Sports Spectrum, Jason Romano, know him pretty well, and he does a fantastic job highlighting these athletes who talk about it and aren't ashamed. And look, I get it. A lot of people don't. When DeMario did his little things on Sundays, like, nobody really cared or wanted to hear that. But again, it's bigger than football for a lot of these people. And we can talk about football all the time and everything. But, again, using that platform to drive something positive in a world like today, I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. And so, again, it's good that more are not ashamed of it. I won't say the player, but I know there was a player, the other year who was going through a really tough personal time. And between a lot of the players who were of faith, they ended up helping this guy, his life so much. And look, they've baptized teammates and such. Like, I mean, this is a big deal, right? And you see a complete 180 from the player, and their personal life is in turmoil and such. And so that's the type of stuff you'll never see a story about or hear about, really. But that's why I think you look at this locker room too, and you hear guys talk about why it's so good in a lot of ways. It's because a lot of these people are aligned, not just on the football field, but outside too.
Yeah. It's brotherhood, it's community, it's all things that pull people together, and they feel like they're part of something that gives them support and gives them, you know, purpose, and makes them feel, you know, that they can do these things and be powerful in their lives, and all power to them. You know, in my mind, I was just going to say, you know,
Sure.
If anyone hasn't heard John's podcast that he did, Faith in the Field, me and Mike have been listening to it. I think it's some really powerful stuff in there, John, and the interviews you did with Demario and Chris and those guys are really, really, you know, interesting. I think anyone should go back and listen to that work you did. It was like 2021, I suppose, when you was doing that. 2022, it's still,
Yeah,
I think it resonates, and people should go and listen to it. I think it's some really interesting stuff in here, and it's very powerful.
yeah, for sure. And you know, I talked to Luke McCown was at the combine. Luke McCown was one of the people I talked to as well. And, you know, I asked him because I'm like, you remember me? He's like, absolutely. And we just caught up about family and all this other stuff. And I think John Kitten was in there, you know, so it was just one of those things where it was just really cool to see, you know, people just be vulnerable for a little bit and aren't ashamed. And that's the type of stuff that, you know, again, not many people did. And I wanted to find a voice at the time to really do that. And it hasn't totally gone away, but you know, at the same time, it's just it seems more prevalent today, which I'm happy to see.
Yeah,
and that's a great note to great positive note, I think, to sign off on, John. Once again, John, thank you so much for joining us.
You bet. I appreciate you guys. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.